Good evening, everybody. My name is Maya Locker, and I'm the Programs and Events Coordinator with the Museum at Eldridge Street. Thank you so much for joining us for this virtual program with artist Tobi Kahn in honor of Rosh Hashanah. We're going to have time for a Q&A at the very end, about 20 minutes of questions and answers. So feel free as we're going through the program to put those questions in the chat box. If the question is a timely question, I will interrupt Tobi and ask that during the program. So just put all the questions you have in the chat and we'll either ask them during the program or at the end during the Q&A. If you prefer to raise your hand at the end and ask your question out loud, you'll also have the opportunity to do so. For those who haven't visited us before, the Museum at Eldridge Street is housed in the historic Eldridge Street Synagogue. Built in 1887, it was the first grand synagogue built by Eastern European Jews in the US. We were nearly lost to neglect in the mid-20th century before our massive restoration project brought the space back to its former glory and for public use for both virtual and in-person programs like this one. If you're local or you're going to be visiting the city, please pay special attention to our walking tours. We've got a ton of great offerings coming up, from our signature Lower East Side walking tours to a special tour of the Bowery, so please check those out. If you're not local, don't worry, we have some great virtual programs like this one coming up. We have a program in honor of Yom Kippur coming up, all about the meaning of Yizkor. So that's in partnership with Plaza Memorial Chapel, so please check that out if you're interested. We also have a program for Sukkot about why Jews eat in the sukkah, so you can check that out as well. And then at the end of the month, we have a very special Zoom program all about feminist shtetl horror tales, which I'm sure you've never heard that phrase before, so please check that out as well. I'd also like to announce that if you've not had the opportunity to check out Tobi's show in person at the museum, please consider coming by for our open house with Tobi on Thursday, October 10th from 5 to 8 p.m. That's next week. The museum will be open late for Lower East Side Fall Gallery Night, where lots of galleries and institutions in the neighborhood are going to be open late. So please check us out and our neighbors as well. You can check out all of our programs on our website, and I'll paste that link to our events calendar in the chat momentarily so you can peruse them and register for the programs that interest you. And with that, I'd like to introduce our speaker for this evening. Tobi Kahn is a painter and sculptor whose art has been shown in over 70 solo museum exhibitions. Works by Kahn are in major museum collections globally, including the Solomon Guggenheim Museum, the Phillips Collection, and the Houston Museum of Fine Arts. To learn more about Tobi, please visit tobikahn.com. And with that, I'll turn the screen over to Tobi. Thank you. Thanks so much for being here with us again.
So first of all, thank you all for coming. I've been running back and forth because I'm cooking for Rosh Hashanah. We have 3 huge meals and 2 small meals. But so I might have to run off for 30 seconds to turn off the oven because I don't want the Brussels sprouts to get too dark. So with that, let me get started. So we decided to do this program about different ceremonial objects, but concentrating a lot on Rosh Hashanah, Sukkot, and because the show will be down by the time Hanukkah comes, I have a Hanukkah piece too, and I just picked a few objects that I think would relate well. But I want to start with a piece that's never been shown before in a museum, and let's go to that one. This was a wonderful story. A collector of mine from the West Coast had seen my Omer counters, and he basically said, I love your Omer counter, but I want to have something a little different. Can you think of something? And I said, well, what holiday do you like? And he said, you're the artist. Tell me what you like. And I said, well, I work best when I'm in dialogue. So he said, well, I do like Rosh Hashanah, but I have enough apple and honey dishes. Can you think of anything else? And I said, well, you know, from the time I was a kid, I always minded that the person who was going to blow the shofar took the shofar out of a not such a nice bag, and it just looked, you know, like we're praying, beseeching from God to save us, and the kolot, all the different melodies and sounds are each very different, and I always felt that there was not enough honor given to the shofar. So I said to him, if you send me your shofar, let me make something to hold your shofar. Whenever I make any new ceremonial object, I do at least 7 because my mentor, Peter Sells, told me once, if you're going to do something, do more than one of them, because otherwise only one person gets to see it. And very often that is a private collector, and then nobody in the world else sees it. So I've made quite a few different iterations. This is mine because that's my shofar. And I thought about how could you make something to hold the shofar that gives it dignity, but also goes back to the fact that it's a ram's horn. And we think about the binding of Isaac. And I've always felt very bad for that ram that was not doing anything and gets sacrificed. I'm happy that Isaac didn't, but I wanted to do something giving the ram's horn and the ram itself a lot of dignity. And I also always thought of those early paintings by Chagall, those pieces where he looks at the tops of the buildings in his small town that he came from. So I wanted to feel something like a cross of an altar and tops of buildings. So the shofar is going out to the whole city, and you are waking everyone up for teshuvah, for repentance, and hoping for a better year. So this was done in 2004. The first one I did was in 2000, and I've done quite a few other iterations. So they all are similar, but it depends on what the shofar looks like. And I've now done them in different colors also. They're always in, this is pewter. I've done it in more of a silver color. I've done it in more of a bluish color, but I always want it to look like a cross between an altar, a mizbeach, and the top of the city. All right, let's go to the next. So this one, I've done many different images for Rosh Hashanah, apple and honey. This was the first one I did. This was in 1998. And I started thinking about the fact that, in Judaism, you have apple and honey. And my mother had a beautiful glass Steuben piece that we always used, but I wanted to do something that felt very much in relationship to a figurine or a figure holding the honey and a platter or a plate holding the apple. And I thought, when you have the December 31st, January 1st, it always has an image of an old father time leaving the year and a new baby starting. And I felt like that is not how I want to think of Rosh Hashanah. I want to think of it as, the end and the beginning, but not old and young, but everyone coming together. So I decided I've always been fascinated by dancers, and I wanted to do this as a woman dancer, basically holding up the honey, and the shape of the hand holding up the dish is based on a Rodin. And if you see it underneath, and then the spoon is like a baby spoon. So I wanted the colors to be earth tones. So it's gold, copper, and green is for, I wanted the apple, which is red, to be on a green background. If there are any questions, please let me know so that I can stop. All right, let's go to the next one. So I thought to myself, if anyone knows my work, I've done many meditative spaces, and I did a piece in New Harmony, Indiana called Shalev. I've always wanted to do one that basically has a figure praying, and I hope you can see it from here. It's a very abstracted figure, and people have asked me, why is it not male or female? Because to me, it's any human being praying, and it's putting up their hands. Now, I'm a Kohen, and can people see my face in here or not?
Yeah, they can see you.
All right, so you see I'm putting up the kahuna. I'm a Kohen. This is, and if you ever have been in tombstones of Kohanim, and some people say, what about Star Trek? He was a Kohen too, and that's why he made that image. I wanted this figure to be holding up their hands in beseeching of God, and I wanted the outside of the sculpture to look very much like a chet for Chai, and the figure itself looks like a little yud. So it's an abstraction, but it is it's a meditative piece. And the other ones that I've done are usually 14 to 16 feet outside, but this is the model. Every large outdoor sculpture I do starts off as a model, and then it becomes a very large piece. All right, let's go to the next. So this one, there are many images of it. In fact, recently, one of the newer pieces that I just did one this year, is now at the museum in Temple Emmanuel. I got from my bar mitzvah an etrog holder, and I used it until we had children, and then it was in the shape of an etrog, and I thought it was beautiful. The problem is, when you have children and you have to carry your lulav, you can't hold the shape. And I, again, didn't want to put it into a plastic bag or a bag. All the pieces I've made. In fact, I have one right behind me. I'll show you this one. This is the one I now use without an image. Fits under your arm. So all the pieces are very practical, and you don't have to worry about the pitum getting ruined, because there's enough space inside. And all of them, I have some sort of cushioning inside. So when you put it down, nothing gets hurt. I've now made over a dozen, either much more abstract shapes or the ones with a little etrog on the outside. When I was very young and I was living in Israel, I went to pick etrogim from an etrog tree. They are so beautiful. And what's fascinating is the branches, you can't believe that the branches can hold such heavy fruit. Again, I very often use the piece you can see is a gold and argaman, which is a reddish color. I use a lot of biblical colors in all of my ceremonial objects. I also made sure that no matter how big your etrog is, it can fit in the box. So it's a little larger than most etrogim would be. And I always have cushioning inside. Let's go to the next one.
Toby, I wanted to address a comment in the chat, because I know that you've spoken a lot about Stonehenge as one of your influences, and that was a
Yes.
comment on the last work, and also I thought it was relevant to the work you just picked up behind you. Do you want to comment on that?
Yes. So I'm going to show you another piece, and you're going to see one that's in here. So Stonehenge is the largest single artistic influence in my work. When I was in my 20s, I spent time in England, and through a wonderful patron of mine, I was a very young artist. They arranged for me to sleep at Stonehenge. It's one of the most beautiful sacred spaces to me. I have always felt it tells a lot about a society when even thousands of years ago, people made spaces that were sacred. So yes, it comes into my work a lot. That and Cycladic art. Cycladic art is art of the Cyclades. The Cyclades are islands outside of Greece. They were around the same time as we became a people 5,000 years ago. So yes, it is very much of an influence on me. And but it's an influence that I wear with pride. But if you put it next to Stonehenge, you'll see that I'm not copying it. I'm using it as a reference. I don't know if you know this, anyone here does know this, but most artists are always in dialogue with artists of earlier times. Somebody once said to me, boy, you're going way back. And I'm going, yeah, I like going way back. But as a Jewish people, we've been around for so long. So I like that conversation. But thank you for whoever brought that up. So now this, I'm going to show you the one I have at home. This is a fun project. I'm going to show you the one I have here. I've done many different versions of this. And oh, this is mine. I didn't realize my assistant put this up. So this is to put the lulav inside, because again, all the things I do are because of situations in my early life. I would go to synagogue and for a Sukkot, and everyone would put their lulav on their benches, and they always either fell down or people would sit on top of them. So I thought, wouldn't it be great to have something where the lulav fits right inside here and stands straight. And then when you're using it, you take it out, but when you're not using it, it still looks like a beautiful piece of a sculpture. Now, what was also important to me is that it looks beautiful without a lulav in there. And this also looks like an ancient site. I just finished a 25-foot outdoor sculpture in downtown Philadelphia for the Honickman Center, Jefferson's new hospital. And somebody who had seen my work before said, wow, these 3 pieces have a real conversation with something you just did. And this was 18 years ago. And I said, every artist has their own vocabulary. So if you put it next to it, it doesn't look the same, but it looks like the same artist did it. And I talk about people like Giacometti, who I love. And you can tell a Giacometti from as soon as you see one. And I think about people like Morandi or Mondrian or Matisse. And you start to know their language. So my language is I'm very interested in images that have angles, but are not exact. And that each way you look at it, as Henry Moore said, you look at it from one side, it looks like one thing, and you look at it from another side, it looks like something totally different.
And Tobi, for those who don't know in the audience, would you explain what a lulav and esrog is?
Oh, I would be honored to. If you don't know, you should watch the movie. I think it's called Ushpizen, isn't it? Is that the name of it?
I'm not familiar. I'm not sure.
Oh, this is an amazing movie. Well, and I'll try and, when my wife comes in or somebody, if they know it, it's a great story. And it takes place in Israel, and they're looking for the perfect etrog. And etrog is a citron, and on Sukkot, which is, I always say that it's the Jewish Thanksgiving. In fact, I'm gonna show you a sukkah in a minute. And if you can, if we can send out a video of me talking about my sukkah, maybe anyone who comes, we can send that out. There's a 5-minute video of me going into the sukkah and telling the story about it. But you take basically it's a palm. You take there are 4 different types of things. You have it's a palm leaf. You have a citron, which is it looks like a lemon. And then you have hadassim and aravos. I'm not sure the translation of each of them, but it's 4 different species of plant/fruit. And there's a tradition to, there are many beautiful traditions, and I don't want to pick just one of them, but if you do find it interesting, go on your own afterwards and go and look up the lulav and etrog, and it'll give you all the information very quickly. I'm hoping was that enough of an explanation? You use it, you shake it a certain way. I wish I had mine here already, because if I could show it to you, you'd know what it is right away.
Thanks, Tobi. And I think the translation I recently had to learn for a class. It was palm, willow, and myrtle. I also didn't know the translation though.
Oh, thank you. Oh my God, everyone should hear that. That's great. And a citron is the name of the lemon type piece.
Thank you so much. And I think now everyone can picture the lulav going through that top hole in there and standing up.
Thank you. So now this is, I'm very pleased, and I want to thank, I don't know if she's here tonight, Zelda Stern. I've always wanted to create a sukkah since I was a little kid. I grew up in Washington Heights, and my grandparents made a beautiful sukkah. A sukkah is the outside dwelling. That's a temporary dwelling that for the holiday, it's 8 days basically. You sit outside. Some people eat outside. Some people sleep outside. It's a temporary dwelling, and it's to celebrate the holiday. And you have an open roof. I'll show you an image of that in a minute as well. And I have been fascinated with what's called Ushpizen, and what that is you welcome in. There's a whole narrative. There are different ways of doing it. You welcome in different people. There's a biblical, it goes all the way back when it was mainly men, or was all men, and then some people did it with men and women. But I decided for my first sukkah, I wanted to do something that was very based on a cross between Mondrian and the architect. I'll get his name in a minute. I wanted to feel like, I don't know if you see all the blocks that come together. There are pieces that look like they're for a person, like a portrait, and some that look like a landscape. And I wanted every person to remember something in their past and bring that with them. And Le Corbusier, that's who I was thinking of. Le Corbusier is an architect who's always interested me. And there's a beautiful church he designed in France, and he had little openings in them. So for my sukkah, I wanted to have the outside coming in and the inside coming out, and that during the day and during the night, you see these beautiful lights coming through the sukkah. And it's used, I also wanted to make sure that my sukkah was not in storage for 11 months a year. So it becomes a yoga studio. And this is at the JCC on the West Side. And if anyone is up on the West Side during Sukkot, I will be there for an open house on the Shabbat of Sukkot. You can call the JCC, the Marlene Meyerson JCC, and hear about it. I will be there and serving seltzer, white wine, and brownies, and some other things. And it's on the lobby terrace of the JCC. And the reason I wanted the sukkah to be white was I wanted people to be able to bring their past memories, and that way, almost like a projection site, that every person can bring in what they felt was their memory of Sukkot, and it makes the conversation, much more personal between them and this space. So let's go to the next one. So that's what it looks like in the day. It's been so exciting, and you see the way the little openings look very different, and it feels to me like it's a jewel box. And I wanted that. The schach is made out of the schach is the covering on the top is made out of bamboo, and I wanted it to be very natural. So they're all different types of greens that we cut and put on top. It's one of the most wonderful projects I've ever done, and I'm so happy it's being used at the JCC regularly. Let's go to the next. So in 2008, I was commissioned by an amazing Jewish philanthropist who invited a series of artists to make Stars of David and Chamsas. Chamsas is a hand to keep away the evil spirit, and a Magen David. So I did it. It was not something it was not an image that I really had worked with before, but she had asked really interesting artists to do it, and I was honored to be one of them, but I never showed this work. And then October 7th happened, and I have felt since then we're living in very fractured times, and I wanted to show a Star of David that was broken into many, many parts, that we all are part of our history, but different parts at different times are more and less coming to the forefront. What I find fascinating in life as an artist, you sometimes do something and only many years later does it have a different resonance. And that has been something that's been very powerful in my life. Sometimes people tell me, did you do it for this? And I've shown this now recently, and many people thought I did it because of October 7th. And I say, no, I didn't, but I decided to start showing it again because of that. So that is a very powerful learning thing about what art can do if you let it become its own, conversation. All right, let's go to the next. So as a child,
We have one question about the last one. We
yes.
have a question about the material of the Magen David.
Yes, It is carved wood. All the images I've shown you, let me see if all of them know. I'm going to show you one that's bronze. I'm going to show you two that are bronze, but most of the pieces I make are first done in wood, and this eventually will be cast in bronze. At the time, I did 3 of these, and I've done, so in other words, I've done 9, basically, 3 different Magen Davids, and then 3 of each one of them. And it was important for me that it was cut on a V, that it sits and you can see it from front and back. So it's wood, and then it's acrylic paint, and the paint is it's rubbed pewter, silver, and techelet, which is a bluish color. And if you look at it carefully, I don't know if you can see it, the pieces are not exactly even, and some of them have pieces that cut all the way through, and some of them look more solid. So on the front and the back don't necessarily look like the same piece. So as a kid, and to this day, one of my favorite things is Birchat HaChodesh, which means the blessing for the new month. And when I was studying in Israel in yeshiva, whenever there was a new month, we would go and dance in a circle outside, seeing the new moon. And in many synagogues, they have something called a luach, a calendar that lets you know when this takes place. And I thought to myself, why don't I make something that when you see this, you know the new moon is there. And then you put this up, and then everyone goes, oh, it's the new moon, and let's do a blessing on the new moon. This is one of the few pieces that's carved wood, and I on purpose did not make everything the same. So most of my paintings are totally rectangular. This one is carved wood to look almost like a tablet. And my fantasy was that people looking at this would say, wow, where did he find that? I'd be thrilled to have people think that I found it rather than made it. And the white is much thicker paint, and the gold recedes. So I wanted you to feel like you were looking inside of a cave, and this is what you saw from outside. All right, let's go to the next. So Shabbat candlesticks. In fact, I have quite a few here as well. Over the years, I've made at least a dozen different versions of candlesticks, and it's usually because somebody approaches me and says, you know, I want to give my wife, or I want to buy something for my family. Have you ever thought of doing something based on this or that? So the little ones in the front are based on flowers. Those are bronze. The little figurines are 2 women. Somebody asked me, because he was somebody who loved all the women in his family, and he said, Shabbat candlesticks should really be in the shape of the women, the matriarchs in my family. So those are 2 right over there. I don't know if you can see my arrow. The 2 little green ones are 2 women figures. And then the top one was, I got commissioned during the Olympics, I think 12 years ago. Someone called me and said, you know, I'm so interested. I watch people run with a torch after the Olympics, and I've always felt Shabbat was was like the torch for the week. Would you make something like that? And so I've done many versions now of that. And you can hold them from the bottom. I don't know if you can see it, but it's based on the concept of a torch. And then the red ones, those over there, thanks for pointing to them, were made for, this was commissioned by a family that had very diverse backgrounds, and there were quite a few people in the family that were Jews by choice, and they wanted it to feel like their community, their family was a larger community, and they wanted something to keep away the evil spirit from their huge family. And I said, well, there's something called a red bendel, that some people wear. They get it. It's a Sephardic tradition. I don't know if everyone does it, but I've seen it in Israel, where you have a red band that goes around your hand. And that was the first time and the only time that I made candlesticks in red. And it's also made with a lot of different blocks and moving parts, because the family was so large and so diverse that they wanted to somehow show that in their Shabbat candlesticks. Now, some of them are cast in bronze, some of them are in wood, and for the ones that are in wood, I have little glass pieces that sit on top inside and have little candles that go in there, so there's no problem of anything happening, and they sit right inside very firmly. Let's go to the next. So this is a little early for Hanukkah, but this was an amazing project. Somebody asked me, would you ever do a candlestick that somehow relates to the fact that there was enough, everyone thought there was enough oil for one day, but it lasted the whole time. And I said, oh, I love that idea. And I'm somebody who's done ikebana flower arranging, and I've been fascinated in flowers all my life. And one of the flowers, I think this is what everyone's going to take away from tonight, is that there's one flower that continues to grow after you cut it. And it grows another inch or two, and that is a tulip. And I thought to myself, why not use the metaphor of a tulip that continues to grow even after you cut it into the concept of the fact that there was enough oil for one day, but it lasted for all those days. So, on one side, you can see that they look like little pods. On that side is where you put the candles. And on the other side is a place it's an open pod where you can put oil and a wick. Now, people have said to me, Tobi, they have to, according to halacha, according to tradition, they have to all be exactly equal. And I said, I agree, but I like the fact that this looks so organic. So what I did is I drilled into the pods different amounts, so the tops, if you put the candles in, it's exactly equal. The other thing is I wanted it to feel like the tulip leaves. I don't know if you noticed that, and when you have a tulip, especially a parrot tulip, each one of the leaves opens in a different way. So there are 3 open pods on the bottom that relate to the closed pods on the top. There's also a tradition in Judaism that the world stands on 3 things: Torah, which is studying; avodah, good deeds. Avodah, worship; and gemilat chasadim, which is good deeds. So you'll see in my work very often I have levels of 3. So on the bottom there are 3. If you look at the 3 sections, there are 3, and then there are 3 pods in each one. And I forgot to tell you, I know that they're not 9 days of Hanukkah, but what I did was I want you to be able to put the shamash, the candle that lights all the other ones, either in the middle or where you want. And there's another little piece of bronze, which is in the museum exhibition, that you can move that so that the candle that lights everything else is somewhere in there. How are we doing? Any questions? All right. So now we're going to another spice box that I really had fun making. This is also in 1998. The show has worked from 1992 through 2024. I just picked some of the earlier pieces here because I always feel the people that know me know all my new work, but most people don't know the earlier work. And I want to thank all the people that are coming that I know, and thank you. I know, Hannah, you told me you'd be here, and Ben Post. If you're here, I want to thank Ben Post, because it's because of Ben Post there's a gorgeous catalog for this exhibition. But in this piece is a much earlier piece. And again, I've always liked looking at bird feeders. And in bird feeders, there are many different ways to feed birds. And so this looks like it's in the shape of a bird, and you open up the top and you put the samim, the spices, in there, and when it's not being used, it's closed. And this can easily be passed around. When I was younger, I went to many Havdalah programs, and you'd always pass around the spices. And so you either can hold it by that piece on the side, or you can hold it from the bottom. And it looks almost like a very thin version of a bird sitting on a piece of wood. All right, Ness, I'm online. All right, let's go to the next one. So this is because people on over Rosh Hashanah and on Sukkot, you have something where there's a memorial service for all the dead. I want to show one of my memorial lights. So I've done many, many different memorial lights over the years. This one was done in the memory of my mother. And the story of this to me is so wonderful. And I'll gladly mention her name because she was an amazing friend, patron who's now in her 90s. Her name is Phyllis Wertentile. If anyone knows her, you should let her know that I mentioned her. And when my mother died 20 years ago, she said to me, you should really do something in memory of your mother. And I said, yeah, I'll do it one day. I think that's a beautiful idea. And in 2011, she said to me, you know what? I'm going to commission you to do one. So that was quite, my mother died in 2004. This was 7 years later. And she said, you're doing this one now. I'm commissioning you. You should do it. And it was really joyful for me to do something like this. My mother really believed that life was a journey. And this is very different than any of the other. I've done, I think, over 15 different memorial lights. But she was very interested in life being a journey. So I wanted it to feel very much like a bridge. And I wanted to bring in nature. So that's why this is in bronze, by the way. I wanted the patina. Patina is how you treat the bronze. I wanted to have it, there's something called farric, which is a type of chemical you can treat the bronze with. And I wanted it to be gold sitting on a greenish surface. So you felt nature, and I wanted it to have a certain amount of joy for a full life. Let's go to the next one. I wanted to leave time for conversation. So I wanted to end with a painting. So the Jewish Museum over the years have asked different artists to look at their collection and do pieces based on that. And I was one of the artists asked in 2012, I think it's 2012, to look at illuminated manuscripts and do something based on that. And this was based, I think it was a 16th century Italian manuscript. And what's so beautiful in illuminated manuscripts, in the front of the manuscript, you have these, above the first few words, you have beautiful colored imagery. And most of the other artists in there wanted words in there. And I wanted it to be very abstracted. But if you can see, Maya, can you show them? There's a Lamed Tuf Vav But that says Latov on the left side in that floating area. Do you see that, Maya? Can you point that out? It looks like I'll go over to the left of the image.
On the side?
No, let me wish it. No, on the left in the middle.
Ah,
right there, a Lamed Tuf Vav Bet. So it's very abstracted, but once I tell you, you'll see it. But I wanted it to feel like the parchment was, I wanted the background to have a parchment-like look, which was a yellowish color. I made it a little yellower. And then I wanted to have the colors that were in this illuminated manuscript. The background was more of a gold. I made it more of a yellow because I didn't want it to be screaming at you too much, but I like the way the four colors really work together and almost tell an abstract story, because you don't know what the manuscript was about below, but I wanted to have a joyous feeling, and I wanted to feel like everything was floating. So the letters and all the color was floating on top of the parchment. So now we have 8. I think that's the last one. Am I correct?
yep, that's it.
Yeah, good. So now I wanted to have around 20 minutes or 8. Now we have 18 minutes for people to ask any questions they wanted, because I'm very interested in a dialogue rather than a monologue. So does anyone have any questions? I'm not shy. You can ask me whatever you would like.
We have a question. She says, this inspires me to make something for my husband, of blessed memory, who died this year. I felt him coming into the house as you spoke of your mother. Thank you. That's very.
Whoever said that, thank you for bringing that up. I really believe that souls stay with you. People always say to me, do you still think of your mother, it's 20 years later, and I think of her every day. And my grandmother, who lived to be 94, used to tell me how much she missed her father. And I would say to her, Oma is German for grandmother. I'd say, Oma, your father would have been over 120 now. And she goes, I still miss him though. And I think there's something beautiful. I think you should make something. And when you look at it, you'll think of him. So if that happened, that was worth the whole evening for me.
And we have another question. Is there a project you want to do that you haven't done yet?
Yes. Oh, good question. So my newest project is, I don't know if you know who, so the last two big projects were the Sukkah project and that outdoor sculpture in Philadelphia. That's in front of a hospital, that's 25 feet tall. The next project, I've been thinking about the environment for 30 years, and I've done pieces like that, but now I'm very interested in a purification room, something that you don't have to get wet, but that it alludes to that alludes to holiness, but you feel like you're in water, but you don't have to be in the water, but it makes you feel like you can be cleansed or cleaned. And it's become even more important to me since October 7th, because when you hear terrible news, you want to somehow heal yourself. And Kusama, I don't know if you know her work. I love her work. She did these endless rooms. It's not what I want because it's too glitzy. I want to do a space that's like 8 feet tall by 12 feet by 12 feet that you can go into. I don't know if any of you have seen my work for the healthcare chaplaincy. I've done many meditative rooms, but now I want to do one that you go into the space and you're surrounded by a sound of water. It's not water. The light all comes from the top, and you feel like you're in a holy space that could be cleansing. If you have a chance, there's a beautiful show up right now of one of my favorite artists whose name is Doug Wheeler. It's a David Swerner gallery, and it's very different than what I do because he works with light, but mine would be much more tactile and much smaller. I wanted to not be able to have more than 9 people in there at a time.
We have some love for Kusama in the chat, and we have someone who said that that's a fantastic idea, but it would have to be a gigantic space.
No. Let me
It would be a smaller space.
It's going to be, I want it to only fit. So if anyone has seen some of my other meditative spaces, I always do them no big. I don't want more than a minyan. I don't want it to be more than 10 people going in at a time. I really only want 9 people. I originally only wanted 3 people, and then I realized it'll take too long for people to go in and out that way. But and in Kusama's, it's 1 person at a time very often. But I think 9 is a beautiful number. And so I'm looking for an institution. It almost happened, but then October 7th happened, and we had to stop the planning of it. So hopefully it'll happen. And the model is all finished. And now I'm just waiting for the institution that wants the place to have it.
Toby, one of your students has shouted out your visual artist Beit Midrash. Do you want to talk about that?
Yes. The artist Beit Midrash, whoever is here from there, thank you from coming. It's one of the things I'm most proud of being involved with. And the artist Beit Midrash is at the Stryker Center at Temple Emmanuel. We meet on Monday nights. We've done it for, I think 20 years, or maybe 21 years. It was founded with Rabbi Leon Morris and myself. Now we work with, I teach together with Rabbi Diane Kohler-Esses and Rabbanit Leah Sarna. It's a 2-hour class. The first hour is sacred texts, and the second hour is a critique. And all the artists look at all the work, and we discuss what they did. And the work is very often based on the text that we're studying at the time.
Amazing. And
Whoever that is, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. We have another question about your commemoration works, and if you've thought of doing a piece for October 7th, or if you've done one for October 7th.
I have. I've done 4 pieces. 2 of them are in different museum shows right now. It took me a long time. I was asked right after, as I was after September 11th. I'm very often called immediately to do it because it's something that I'm very committed to. In fact, I'm in a show at the museum in Frankfurt now, in Germany. In fact, the piece was in the show at the Eldridge Street, and I love that in the show there were 48 pieces in the Eldridge Museum show, and now inside. And Nancy, thank you for putting it in there. Nancy Johnson, the curator's online, but we put a little picture of the piece, and it's already left for Germany. So I've been doing memorial pieces for over 40 years. It takes me a while to come up with what to do, but in the last month, I did 4 different pieces and 2 different new memorial lights for that. And I'm very honored that they're both traveling in different museum shows about that. But yes, and I'm sure I'll be doing more, but yes, I have.
Your work, of course, Toby, is right now in our historic space. Work that's also in our historic space is by the recently departed Mark Podwall, who we're very sad to have lost last week. We have a question about our new floor. I was wondering if you had any comments about it. You've had the opportunity to see it a few times, and you knew Mark personally.
So Mark was a very good friend of mine. I've known him for, I'd say, at least 40 years. He and I had talked many, many times about doing a show together. And when he was honored by the Eldridge Street Museum last year, he said, you know, Toby, we always talked about doing an exhibition together, and now my floor is going to be put down during your exhibition. I think that's pretty good. So I would agree with him. I'm very honored and thrilled by it. And what I've always found interesting about Mark's work is you can tell his work immediately, but this is quite different than his other pieces. Very often he has writing in there, and this time the symbols of the zodiac are the only symbols, but the color of the floor is breathtaking. I mean, it's really, really beautiful. And I think it's very important that artists try different things. And I'm very proud and impressed that I think this was the first floor that he ever did. And it looks beautiful there, and it works very well. I also want to say that I've always admired, I have 2 Kiki Smiths here in my apartment. I'm a big fan of, in fact, I have 4 Kiki Smiths. But I have always loved her work, and I'm very honored that the Eldridge Street Museum is showing contemporary artists as well, and that we're part of the collection. And after my show leaves, there are 3 mezuzot that I made out of the glass from the building that will stay there. So I'm very excited that my show has been up for it will be up for 6 months, but that 3 of my works will stay there after the show comes down.
Yes, and for those who don't know, our big blue stained glass window was done by Kiki Smith in 2010. So if you go to the museum right now, you'll see works by Toby, by Kiki Smith, and by Mark Podwall. So definitely it's an exciting time to come to the museum right now. We have another question about how escalating anti-Semitism's affected your work, both currently and in the past.
I have to be honest, I never felt anti-Semitism until now. I mean, as a kid, I was careful what blocks to walk on. I went to a Jewish school in Washington Heights. I went to the Breuer School in Washington Heights, and then later to Yeshiva University High School. And I knew when I'd go there which blocks I shouldn't walk on. But this is a whole new world and a whole new chapter. I find it very, very disturbing. And it's the first time I think both my wife and I feel that we're very happy that our parents are not alive for it. I don't even know what to say, but I believe, I'm an optimist, so I believe somehow things will get better. And I want to tell a story that I heard from a man who was a huge influence on me. His name was David Israel. I go to synagogue every week, and when my kids were younger, we still have a lot of company, but now it's mainly people we know. But when my kids were younger, I would look in synagogue who looked like they had nowhere to go, and I'd invite them to our house for lunch. And one day I invited this wonderful man who's not alive anymore, David Israel, and he came to the house, and we became very close friends. And he lived in Venezuela at the time, and he would come whenever he was in New York for business. He would spend Shabbat lunch with us. And one day he told a story when my mother died 20 years ago. He said, you know, Toby, you're so lucky that you have a kever, you have a cemetery to go to, because all of my family were destroyed, killed, and they were they were not, there's no way to go to mourn them. But he told the story that when he was a kid in the camps, the way he stayed alive was he worked in the infirmary, and he would collect the bread. When somebody would die, he would collect the bread and find people that needed the bread to stay alive. Does that make sense, Maya? You know what I mean? Like, so, go to so he tells the story, and then Sukkot comes up, and an older rabbi who was in a bed, in a bunk next to him, said to him, David, he was only 9, David, get me a piece of bread, because I want to make a bracha in the sukkah. This is, nobody knew the war was coming to an end, but people, it was a terrible time. And David says, I won't give you the bread unless you take me. And he goes, I can't take you. You're a child and you could get killed. And he said, my whole family's not alive anymore. I'm not taking you unless, you take me along. So he goes there. They make the blessing in the sukkah. And this is a story he tells us at our house, that you have to always think about the future. You have to think about, even if times are terrible, that there's a chance that things will get better. So he's in Venezuela, and then he becomes a very successful businessman, and he invites different Jewish leaders to come and speak to the Venezuelan Jewish community. And one day, this much older rabbi, David must have been in his 50s by then, so this rabbi must have been in his 70s. This man only knew David as his name, David, and David knew this man as the rabbi, but I don't think he really knew his whole name. This guy gets up and says how important it is to be optimistic, because at that time, Venezuela was going through a very bad time. And he says, what you have to do, even in the worst times, is when you can celebrate a chag, you celebrate a holiday, you have to do it with your full heart. And he says, I was in the camps, and he tells the story. And he goes, this little boy brought me the bread, and David raises his hand, who's now definitely a much older man. I must have been in his 60s. I don't know exactly ages. And he said, I was that little boy. And the two of them met again. They didn't know that they would both be there for that. And that is what I want to say optimistically. Even when things are really not so good or really bad, you have to try and celebrate. And especially since it's going to be Sukkot soon. And I always think of him on Sukkot. We have to try. And I'm not Pollyanna by any stretch of the imagination. I know what the world is like right now, but any times we can celebrate and do joyous things together, I think that's very important to do. And that is one of the reasons I make art, by the way. I really believe in commemorating everything, for good and for bad, but to have a conversation.
Thank you so much. And talking more about, unfortunately, tragedy, but the beauty that can come from it. We have a question about specifically your art made in memorial of different traumatic events. They say that so much of the specifically September 11th or COVID art that they've seen is cliched or topical, and not that that's always a bad thing, but how do you translate tragedy into the kinds of art that you create?
Well, God, you have great people asking questions more.
I agree.
I don't even know. I wonder if I know that person. Who asked that?
This is Khani.
Oh, great question, Connie. Thank you. So what I do is it takes me months. People always say to me, can you make something now? And I say, no, I can't. It took me, I did one piece for 9/11 a year later, and then most of the work I did 10 years later. And I recently did more even later. I think it has to sit with you, and you have to think about where it fits in history and where you fit in history. So the most important thing I tell you is don't do things the next day. The next day is a very quick answer, and that usually is not that powerful or strong. I think if you want to do something, you should take your time and let it sit with you and let it rethink it and think about, like, I don't want to say love, but I do love Goya's very famous piece. And I think I was just lecturing in the Prado, and I saw Picasso's piece. And I think, it doesn't matter how long it takes, but it matters how thoughtful you are about something. So for everyone that's doing something, if you're an artist in the group, think about what September 11th made you think of. Think about what COVID made you think of. Think about what October 7th made you think about, and try and be as specific and as large at the same time. I've always been told by my mentors, my teacher, George McNeil, always said, the more specific you are, the more monumental it becomes, meaning you can think about something very close to who you are, but if the piece is honest, it can talk to a much larger audience.
Thank you. And I'm going to combine two questions now because I think they're both very related. So we have one person who said she's wondering whether the Cavalry Hospital might be interested in commissioning you with something because of their expanded sensitivity to Jewish patients and healing spaces for families. But I also have a question about, how do you think of your pieces for yourself or for a show versus your private commissions?
So, wow, both good questions. So I would love to do something for them. I've done hospices. So what happens usually, this is how it happens with me. Somebody knows my work. Somebody unfortunately loses somebody in their family. I'm very proud. You said you're working with Plaza Memorial Chapel. I did pieces for them. I get commissions because somebody knows what I do and says, would you want to do something for us? 95% of the time I say yes. The only time I say no is if they won't let me do what I want. You know what I mean? If they say, we want this and this, and then I'm going to get somebody else. If they say, we'd like you to think about it, I usually talk to the people in charge. I've done things for many, many hospitals. I've done things for emergency rooms. I've done things for, a Plaza Memorial. I always ask, what do you hope will come out of it? So it's very important to me. That to me is a collaboration. So I go to my studio every day. I'm now very blessed. I have more work than I can possibly do. And I'm very blessed with a very large studio. So I work on many, many projects at the same time. I'm usually working on one major project and then quite a few smaller ones. I'm usually working on at least one museum show, sometimes 2 or 3. But when you have a museum show, it takes a year or 2 for it to actually get there. So then I'm working on the catalog for that show. I just am very thrilled that the Phillips, in fact, they picked up the work today. The Phillips in Washington owned 7 of my works, and now they own 22 of my works because an amazing patron of mine, I'd love to do something for her because I loved her. Dorothy Tapper Goldman passed away, and I did a wall installation for her of 15 paintings, and that has just gone to the Phillips. So, I work on I go to the studio 6 days a week. I don't work on Shabbat. I teach at university 1 day a week, but other than that, I'm always in the studio.
And I think with that, we have time for one more question because we are reaching the hour. We have a question about this exhibition that you've showed, and the few works that you've shown are all from different years. This show at the museum is something of a retrospective in that sense. How do you conceptualize a retrospective both for you as an artist and also as an art viewer for other people?
So I want to thank Nancy again. I hope she's still on. She was
Yeah.
pure joy to work with. I love Nancy Johnson. I would love to work with her again because she, it was this is the smallest space that I've ever had a show in. It's really tight, but it's a breathtaking building. So Nancy and I decided that we should show works from different periods, but I wanted people to see that I also do very large pieces. So we had 6 photographs of monumental pieces on one wall, and then we mixed paintings and sculptures. Today's lecture was about ceremonial objects. So half the show are paintings. But I wanted to talk about the holidays, and that's why I did it that way. One of the things that I think is very funny in life, I've shown at the Albright Knox, at the Newberger, at the Houston Museum. I've shown in LA in the Skirball. And very often when you do a show at a museum, people think that's the only work you're doing. So I wanted this show, since it was such, I wanted to enjoy this, the not largeness, because I think it's a large institution, but the area that I had to work with was very small. And I wanted to use that to show as much diversity. And I think Nancy and I both agreed we wanted to show as much diversity as we could to let people see all the different types of work that I did. And the name of the show, and I have to thank my wife, the writer Nessa Rappaport, the show is called Memory and Inheritance. And because the synagogue is such a famous museum / synagogue, that is about inheritance, what we inherit, and memory is about what we inherit and how we remember it. And I was hoping that every individual who came to the show would bring his or her or their history with them.
I think that's a fantastic way to end the program tonight. I just popped in the chat a link to our exhibitions on our website. So if you want to read more about what Tobi's talking about and read more about the pieces that he has in the show, please do on there. Also, since Hanukkah, I know it's not for quite a few months, but we are going to be having some holiday programming in December, and this program today was all about holiday programming. If you want to get an early look at our ongoing collection that we have of historic menorahs, you can also find those on this exhibition page. Thank you all so much for joining us. I hope everyone has a Shana Tova and a sweet new year and a meaningful Yom Kippur. And I want to thank Tobi again for joining us and encourage everybody, if you're in the area, to come say hello to Tobi on next week on Thursday, October 10th, from anytime from 5 to 8. You can pop in and see the show alongside him, ask him any questions you have in person about any of the objects. It'll be a really great opportunity. The show ends on November 10th. So after that, you'll only have a month left to see the show. 6 months have gone by so fast. So thank you all so much. And thank you so much, Tobi. Do you have any final words?
Yes, I see Sophie Lowe is here too. Thank you so much. And all the people that came who are friends of mine and collectors of mine and patrons of mine, I want to thank every person that came. An artist only can make art if people are actually looking at it, because I don't believe the art lives until there's a conversation about it. So thank you all for being here. And Maya, thank you. You did a wonderful job.
Thank you so much, Tobi. And we had a lot of your students on tonight who said how much they're enjoying hearing from you today. So I guess you have to do more classes with them.
Good. I adore teaching. So thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. And thank you everybody for joining us, and have a great night. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.